Hey guys, and welcome back to another one of my The Gifted videos and my review of episode 10 of season 2. So not really the longest of breaks that we had to go through waiting for The Gifted. I mean, it's just 2 to 3 weeks, but we were definitely left coming out of episode 9 and waiting for episode 10 with a lot of cliffhangers and a lot of questions. So we had the destruction of Madeline Risman's lab, John being captured by the Purifiers, and most importantly, the turning off of all the mutant control collars all across the board, which I believe does mean chaos. A lot of mutants out there, some of whom were wrongfully incarcerated, but also some others who were probably flat out criminals. But anyway, and without further ado, and having reminded you of how the mid-season finale came to an end, let's get started with the events of episode 10 and number 1. Now, I believe that so far, and over the course of 10 episodes this season, there's been a certain running theme. I think if they were to do that thing that they did with Heroes when it aired in 2004, splitting the seasons into arcs and then giving each arc a title, Origins would end up being a perfect title for all the arcs on this season. But yeah, we've got a running theme on almost every single episode. We've got origin stories, and we've got them as well for a lot of characters. Off the top of my head, Jace, Rebecca, Reva, the Frost Sisters, Marcos, Lorna, and Thunderbird, and that is just off the top of my head. And then on this episode, we've got the three that kind of established the underground. We've got Lorna, John, and Marcos at the very beginning of the episode with one of those flashbacks. So this is sort of how they came to know each other, but not really how they came to know each other, because they do relay the story over there of how they came to meet, Lorna and Marcos that is, and how Lorna was the one to insist that Marcos joins the underground, while John was not really all that for it. We're going to be talking more about Origins as we venture further into this video, but for the time being, number 2, the majority, if not all of us, did expect that the connection between Andy and Lauren is going to get deeper. Some of us fans even expected that we're going to be getting a reunion between the two. Gonna be talking about that later, but let's talk about that initial sort of reunion. So for the first couple of moments, we're kind of tricked into believing that Lauren and Andy are reunited, that he is at her door, he's trying to talk to her, she's rejecting that kind of conversation, but nonetheless, he's right there. But while the scene starts normal audio, normal everything pretty much, we get to realize it's not really what we think it is when it starts getting echoey, and the lighting as well does start changing over time. So it is a dream, we know that because Lauren wakes up from it and because of all the other evidence on that scene, but we also know that these dreams are a product of the connection between the two, Lauren and Andy. So unless Andy is having the same dream, Lauren wouldn't have had it, which means that there is a certain emotional distress that Andy is having at this moment that's making him think this way, that makes him want the approval of his family in order to continue with the inner circle. The question that pops into our minds though at that point in time is whether or not this is out of lack of conviction or out of missing his family, because this episode was as well about family and the value that people put on family. But moving on to number 3, the common saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's really the basis of the title of the episode, enemy of my enemy. So it is really about two enemies, the underground and the inner circle, those two members of the inner circle that started off in the underground, and them agreeing to be friends for a day in order to fight off this common enemy, the Purifiers. But number 4, 2 tours with the Marine Mutant Corps. That's something Jace remembers out of John's file with the Sentinel services. Now in the comics it was Vietnam instead of Afghanistan, there was no Mutant Marine Corps or Marine Mutant Corps, however he said it on the episode, but instead there was the regular Marine Corps that John used to be part of. John's powers though, and as opposed to what is being insinuated on this episode, they did not manifest before he joined the Marine Corps, they did not manifest while he was in the Marine Corps, but rather after he was discharged. That's pretty much what led him into getting in contact with the X-Men and joining up with them. So in a way, even though the comics has no Marine Mutant Corps, this was kind of a hint and a reference towards John's origin story in the comics, his time with the Marine Corps. Now when it comes to the Marine Corps in the comics, they didn't have mutants as much as they did have mutates. Now the difference between mutates and mutants in the comics is mutates are made into becoming superhuman. They are given their powers through science, experimentation, and genetic modification, as opposed to mutants who inherit the X gene. Number 5, another theme of this episode, besides the overall theme of the season, I suppose would be the possibility of redemption. You can see it and hear it loud and clear in Lorna's care for John and the way she still looks at Marcos. You can see it in Jay still holding on to some of his principles, unwilling to go the extra mile in hurting John and torturing him. And it is there as well in the dream that Lauren has about Andy, him wanting validation, as well as his tone when he knows about John and what happened to him. It is really the most obvious when it comes to Andy. He needs validation, he's not sure yet about all that he's doing, and he feels this need for his mom, dad, and sister to be on board with whatever it is that he's doing with the inner circle. The most interesting thing though about these three names is that they are all in morally ambiguous gray zones. Each and every one of them has got a good reason for what they're doing. Each and every one of them has got the right kind of motivation and the right goals as well, only they're using the wrong methodologies in their pursuit of those goals. Number 6, the reunion between Lauren and Andy that some people expected on this episode did happen, only it's not exactly just Lauren and Andy, but rather the entire Strucker family. Now, as you probably noticed, the two parents are really happy to see their son again. Lauren, though, is not as happy. She's obviously still very angry with Andy, still very displeased with him attacking her earlier this season, pushing her out of the way in order to make their escape. And of course there is the parting ways with the Underground and joining up with the Inner Circle to start with. But number 7, one of the so many themes of this episode, is we only see what we want to see, hear what we want to hear, what we want to believe or believe in. Once again, I'm gonna quote Hillbilly Author on Discord who stated that we're trapped, we're all trapped. That's the moral of the story. In this case, and if you think about it, almost every single character on this episode, almost every single one, has been trapped by the choices they've made. And that has always caused or created some kind of a fallout with other family, friends, ethical code, or moral code. And that is exactly what Clarice, Lorna, Lauren, Andy, and Jace are going through on this episode. More than anyone else, they are all accepting their own version of the truth. They all believe what they want to believe. The Inner Circle is either completely evil or completely good. There's no in-between, no gray zone, even though, at the very heart of it, all of it is in the gray zone. But next up though is number 8. One of the questions that you end up posing in the final 15 minutes of the episode happens to be, is Andy somehow getting through to Lauren? Well, the answer is yes, or from what it seems it is yes. So there happens to be two aspects to this answer. One of them is the one that's pretty obvious from watching the episode, and the second one requires a very quick spoiler alert. So what I'm going to be doing over here is I'm going to be talking about my own understanding of a certain synopsis that was released a few days ago. In the meanwhile, if you think this kind of thing is kind of spoilery, you can mute this video for the next 15 seconds until you read the words "End of spoiler." So the very first line in the synopsis of episode 11 reads, "Reed worries as Lauren becomes intrigued by her ancestors and their violent powers." So while the synopsis does have a lot more to it, this part in particular does remind you of Andy on season 1. You know, when he was reading about the Fenris twins and he just got all kinds of fascinated with them, and that's part of what led to him, you know, leaving the Underground and joining in with the Inner Circle by the end of the season. It all kind of adds up towards the idea, the theory that I had after the mid-season finale that Lauren is gonna go dark, or partially dark, that she's gonna be impacted by the emotions of Andy, and that she might find it in herself to make some shady choices, even if on a temporary basis. But number 9, it was about time someone commented on Lorna's headpiece. I mean, it does look amazing, as Marcus does state, and it does look badass. But the scene though does remind us of that one Easter egg that keeps bouncing back to us. There was a birth father, there was a medallion that he gave her, and the medallion was used to create this, but the medallion did look as well as something that Magneto would have gifted her. So yeah, the Easter egg that keeps coming back and the words birth father. Number 10, I love a good weird-ass romance, and that's what this is, Lorna and Marcos. I love how shooting up shit together gets them extremely excited, and the look they have for one another at that moment, that's pretty much their way of having fun, that's pretty much them being more in love than they have ever been before. But moving on though to number 11, Jace Turner breaks down, and the moment of the breakdown was nothing short of great acting and performance by the actor right then and there. It was like he was trying so hard not to do this, not to shoot John. He was trying so hard to hold on to this last shred of morality and ethical values that he's always held so dear. But he's breaking. He's lost his kid, he's lost his wife, even though that was totally his fault. And he did as well join in with the Purifiers, people whose methodologies he does not totally agree with. But you've got all these problems and you stay with these people long enough, you start justifying things for yourself, you start believing that you could do this. You just pull out a shotgun and you start shooting. Number 12, the entire sequence with Clarice, Andy, and Lauren through the hallway kind of reminds you of every single Marvel series on Netflix. There's always that hallway or gauntlet scene. Now this one might not be an exact hallway, but it's kind of reminiscent of all of those hallway scenes on every single Marvel Netflix TV series. One thing that I've got to add over here though is Lauren and Andy fighting together side by side. That was pretty badass. But it was also a reminder that they are using their abilities separately and not their combined abilities. But just imagine, with Andy growing stronger, and Lauren as well because of the entire discovery that Madeline Risman made on the mid-season finale, just imagine if they used their combined abilities. It's gonna be insane. But finally though, number 13, Andy playing his version of Twist, twisting the legs of that guy that tried shooting Lauren in the back. I think that more than anything, what he's seen in this one adventure has gotten him all twisted up in the head, all psychologically messed up. And in his attempt to protect Lauren in this very violent manner, he's also manifesting his emotions due to the fact that he wasn't able to protect Rebecca. But one other thing that you do get out of this scene is that it also tore apart that one last thread of hope that his parents had for him being redeemed. Unless, of course, in S.K. Strucker states, they were to destroy the inner circle. So to make a long story short, this kid, Andy Strucker, has just become as genocidal as the Purifiers, and this is apparently reason enough for the Underground to wage war against the Inner Circle. That being said though, my work here on episode 10 is done. It was a really good episode. I think I give it a 7 out of 10 because I was expecting more of it, but nonetheless it was a really good episode still. But you can let me know in the comments if you thought this was a good episode, if there are any Easter eggs that I might have missed on this video, and will you expect future episodes on the season. Let me know as well if you did like this video by dropping it a much appreciated like, and if that were to be the case, you can always subscribe and enable notifications for my future videos, community posts, and live streams. But until the next time that you tune in for another one of my videos, thank you so much for tuning into this one, and have a great day.